In this video we talk about Keyforge Dark Tidings 2-player starter set. Keyforge is a game that I fell in love with pretty much since I heard Richard Garfield talk about it at a Gen Con event a couple of years ago when we still had that kind of event. But the pandemic will not last forever, we will have them again. So the idea is that this is a game that uses unique card decks. Each deck is unique. It has been generated using 21st century computational sorcery, and so it comes already branded with its own name. You cannot remove, trade, exchange cards. You can see the lineage between that connects Keyforge with Magic the Gathering, but also you can see the differences, which are massive, such as, for example, you don't have to obsess about, collecting that precious card or spending money because you need that card, etc., etc., etc. No matter how much you want a card, if it's not in your deck, you're not going to use it. And so instead of having a collection of cards, you're going to have probably a collection of decks. So this is the new version, Dark Tidings, different from the original one. It has one main different rule. Other than that, it plays like the original one. Plus, of course, you have new cards, new effects, a new general theme, water-based effects, things set in and around the sea. And this is, again, is a starter set, which does what it says. It gives you all that you need to get started with the game. You get 2 decks, of course, but you also get a bunch of other things. Plus the box itself to store the decks that you are likely to then purchase. Incidentally, I used this set to introduce my daughter Amelia, who is now 10, to Keyforge and never played it, so it really works. I wanted to test if it really works to get somebody started playing the game, and it works that way. She loves the game. We're probably gonna go to the friendly local game store soon to see if we can get more decks. It works also in that sense that it makes you want to acquire more stuff because you have 2 decks. But again, definitely everything you need to get started, and then stuff that you will use when you play the game. It comes with a rule sheet, not so trivial. Some of the earlier editions did not. They would just send you online to look for the rules. Here you have all the rules that you need, again, to get started, and some very common keywords. Of course, it's a game that has a ton of keywords, so you're still gonna go online to figure out what's an alpha, what's an omega, that kind of stuff. But overall, really, you can get started easily with the rule sheet. Then you have 2 paper player mat, very nice. They also have the general structure gameplay wise, but they have 2 different illustrations, and I'm gonna show them to you. This is one, this is the other. As for the playmat, it's going to give you the area for the identity card, the deck, discard pile, archives, where you store cards that game effects allow you to put there. Key areas, this is where you place 3 key tokens. They're face down at the beginning of the game, and then you will collect resources to flip them face up. If you flip these 3 tokens face up, you have 3 keys, and that's how you win the game. Battle line is where you place your creatures. Artifacts behind the battle line, where you place your artifacts if you build any. Tokens representing amber, the resource that we use to build the keys, and again, the key tokens that we place face down at the beginning of the game. Lots of other tokens that we place on creatures to represent that they are warding, that they have taken wounds, that they have extra power, that they are stunned, and so on and so forth. Then we got these mini boards representing the chains. You may use game effects, chains are penalties, and you may use game effects to give you that penalty, in which case, say, it says gain chain 3. You place that there, which means at the end of your turn, when you're refilling your hand, you refill it with that penalty. I refill my hand -1 card. If my chain tracker is here, I lose 2 cards when I'm refilling my hand. And after you do that, you move the tracker down, so you're shedding your chains until hopefully you get rid of them. And then, of course, again, we have the decks. These are the 2 decks that I got. Lambert, the allegedly unsettled. I like it. It's like the Schrodinger's unsettled. We don't know how unsettled he or she is, allegedly. And then Neiman, the host of Valor's evil twin. Man, I like one day to get, the evil twin. And then I got the family, the host of the Valor. So evil twin of the Valor, but not that. The person who hosts the Evil Twin of Valor. It's just funny to see some of these names. Now, all decks in Keyforge are unique, but and all come with an identity card that also gives you. Oops, that's not an identity card. That's an identity card, which tells you the 3 houses that they are gonna use, and you put that in your identity section on your playmat. Then all decks in Keyforge of Dark Tidings come with this card. Again, it's not part of the deck exactly, but it simply is used to keep track of certain effects. When you're playing with at least a Dark Tidings deck, you will place this card in between the 2 players, and you place it in neutral position like that at the beginning of the game. Because then the card may be turned so that the low tide side faces a player and the high tide side faces the other. When the high tide side is facing you, basically when you're told to be in high tide, there are certain game effects in your cards that can be triggered. So you cannot do that if the card looks like this, but when it's like that, you can gain 3 chains to raise the tide, in which case I use that to do that. So during my turn, I may do some things and then gain 3 chain, turn this one, then play some cards that require high tide, and so on and so forth. So simply it changes the not the pace, really, the tempo of the action, the timing of certain actions, because you may not be able to do everything every turn. I like the elegance with which Keyforge has removed the idea in Magic the Gathering of lands versus the real fun stuff. Some cards in Magic the Gathering, they're only to fuel other actions. Here you do have limitations, so you cannot play every card every turn, but the limitation is still based on decisions that you make. Meaning you're going to have a hand of cards that belong to multiple houses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, say at the beginning of the game. And these are the ones that I have. So during a turn, at the beginning of a turn, I'm going to declare a house. And during the turn, I can only use cards belonging to that house. So if I use shadows, I can only play cards that have that symbol. If they're creatures and they're in my hand, I can deploy them in the battle line, and there's a nice tactical touch there in that once you start building a battle line, then you can usually only add to the flanks. Unless there is an ability that lets me break that rule, I cannot sneak in things in the battle line. I have to add them to the flank, and some of these also have abilities that connect them to, say, protect the one next to you or do something based on that. So that's a nice, interesting element there, that the physical and relative position matters. It doesn't have to be creatures, it can be other things, say it can be upgrades. Also, if there's a symbol there, I do that. Say here I collect an amber. So it may seem trivial, but I have a lot of cards in my hand of one house. I'm going to use that one, right? But in truth, again, it's not just about playing them, it's also about using them. So maybe later, in a later turn, I do have a hand like this with only one house shadow and a lot of cards of other things, but I'm still going to declare house shadow as the active one for my turn, because I want to use those ones. So it really is an interesting element there, how flexible it is, and the decision of which house to use is far from trivial. So my active house, I can play cards from my hand, activating their effects, deploying creatures of that house, or I can use artifacts of that house if I place them there, and also I can use creatures of that house that already are on the battlefield. I can use them to reap, which is simply I expend it to collect amber, which is ultimately what I need to build my keys. I can use them to attack, in which case they inflict the number written there in terms of wounds to a creature of the opponent, and I get to choose the target, very different from Magic the Gathering. So I inflict that amount of damage, which might be partially or entirely absorbed by the armor. So I'm inflicting 3 against this guy, then actually I only inflict 1 because the armor absorbs 2. Usually the creature fights back, so when I attack, the opponent gets to inflict the number of damages on the attacking creature, unless there is an ability that prevents that counterattack. The number that you see there is both the attack value, so to speak, how much damage you inflict, and the number of life points, so the number of wounds that you get. When it equals or exceeds that one, removes the creature. But again, this is a game in which combat is not the main thing. You could win an entire game simply by protecting your creatures, having them rig the heck out of the ember mines, and so you collect enough ember to build your keys, because ultimately that is how it works. So you have more paths to victory than, say, in Magic the Gathering. You can see the lineage, but there's also a lot to unlearn if you come into this thinking, it's kind of like Magic the Gathering with different art. No, it's really its own beast. So this is the general idea that you have in the Keyforge. I hope this was an overall a useful overall intro if you don't know the game, but also you got to see what you get in the two-player starter set for Dark Tidings. I'm pretty happy with Dark Tidings, with this new set for Keyforge. Yes, it's very similar in essence to the original set, which is perfectly fine. And the main thing here is the new tide effect, which seems small, but it's not insignificant. It does spice things up quite a bit by making timing a little more challenging, because you have to figure out when the tide is facing you, and when is the time to invest maybe a game effect, or maybe simply getting some chains to turn the tide towards you, then use a powerful effect. So it's just not trivial. Again, it's small but not trivial. It doesn't change the overall thing, but I think it makes it so that this set doesn't feel redundant. Now, the new creatures that I saw, the new effects, the new artifacts, fun stuff. Thematically, I think it's interesting. I like the general style of Keyforge, that on one hand, at first glance, may remind you of the general art of Magic the Gathering, but it's a lot more playful, a lot more colorful, cartoonish. There are some cards on Magic the Gathering that I feel uncomfortable playing with my daughters that are now 8 and 10. But there's nothing like that in Keyforge. Thematically is definitely more family friendly. But then, again, from the point of view of gameplay, it is still a solid game that you can play a game night with your adult friends. Not a problem whatsoever. So I only tried those two decks, and discovering those creatures and effects was fun, and so I can't wait to try more decks, because I'm very happy. I always liked Keyforge since it came out, and I think Dark Tidings, yeah, I said it right. Hopefully, Dark Tidings is a very promising set. Again, I tried only 2 sets, but definitely this starter set is a good starting point for anybody who hasn't tried the game yet, or simply hasn't tried this specific line in the game yet.